This is your brain. Now, I know what you must be thinking. Ah! Put it back! But worry not, it's in capable hands.
What the?
If you're wondering who patched you up, it was Daddy. Believe it or not, he's a back alley doctor. His claim to fame is he's killed way more patients than he's saved.
Yeah, that's not a good thing.
Please, at least the dead ones can't sue the crap out of you. Am I right or am I right?
Your brain is quite literally your whole existence. It takes in information from the outside world, stores some of it, often the unimportant stuff, and then is supposed to make decisions constantly about what to do next based on the information stored inside. So while you sit in the exam hall with a head full of information about the genealogy of the TV family from that show you love, and coming off a 6-hour stint of TikTok slowly liquefying your sense of self, you're now being asked to recall how mitochondria work, and the panic attack is beginning to set in. But it doesn't have to be this way. Just because at a glance brains don't look like the silicone-based magic thinking rocks that we've gotten used to, doesn't mean that there isn't a very hackable computer locked inside your skull.
It's just that the brain is made out of meat.
What does the thinking, then?
The brain does the thinking. The meat.
Meat or not, brains still need a reliable system to store memories or they wouldn't function properly. So if we understand the system by which it does that, we can take advantage of it. And then we can remember what we choose, rather than be at the whims of a self-conscious bit of cerebral coral. Whether you're in school and need to cram a bunch of information to pass a test, or you just need to remember someone's phone number or the name of that cute waitress, memory is everything. And I think the system and tricks that we're going to discuss today is something, honestly, everybody should learn. If I took a pack of cards and mixed them, could you memorize the order of the whole deck? Probably not, right? It's too many numbers, and a list of 52 items is a big ask for most people. The 4 things I need from the grocery store can be a struggle enough as it is. But now contrast that with a very different kind of long list. The route that you take home each day. For example, many years ago when I was in high school, to get to school, I first had to navigate a few streets to get to the nearest bus station. I had to then take the correct bus to the subway, navigate the terminal, get on the right train, and get off at the right stop. Then it was on to another specific bus from a collection of a dozen that all stopped in the same spot, and finally a walk down a few streets to get to the school. And once inside, I had to find my locker and then my class. And at no point on my daily commute was it ever really a problem to navigate this incredibly long list of steps, which must be executed perfectly, or I'd have ended up literally anywhere else in the city. It was just the thing you do every day. Maybe you need a GPS for the first couple of times you get to your new job, but once you know a place, you can get around it no problem. So it's not that you're incapable of memorizing a massive list, it just needs to be in the right format. If you think about it, navigating terrain or remembering the specific shapes of objects, berries, or plants is something that brains have always had to do. But numbers and words are a pretty modern conception. They're very abstract, so normally we're limited to only remembering a short list of them because we're using the highly abstract part of our brain to conceptualize them and then hold their values. So let's start really simple and see how we can hack things to make it work better. We're going to start by seeing how we would remember a list of 5 random items. Hairbrush, soy sauce, socks, giraffe, biplane. Now, most people would default to just listing these objects in their head, saying them a few times, and then sort of clenching their cortex and hoping for the best. This is not the way. Instead, let's go object by object. The first trick is visualization. Now, if you happen to experience aphantasia and literally do not see anything when you think about things, sorry, you're shit out of luck. This is not going to work well for you. But for the rest, let's start with the hairbrush. Begin by imagining the hairbrush as the object itself, a specific object, not just the concept of a hairbrush. Think of the one that you have always used, or the one that your partner has kept next to the bed, or similar. Then, we're going to give it a ridiculous, fun color scheme. For example, imagine one with Guy Fieri-type flames on the handle, and you can even extend the visualization, and now the bristles are going to be replaced with clumps of his highly gelled hair. Whatever will take it from a boring object to something that would be impossible to see and not stop and look at if you walked past it. With the first object rendering in your meat, let's add some flavor, and move on to the soy sauce. Again, it's gotta be visual, but we also need to relate it to the first object. So perhaps this time we imagine a soy sauce dish and the hairbrush is floating in it, like a turd in the community pool. Next, the socks. Maybe we make the soy sauce dish be shaped like a claw-footed bathtub, but the tub is wearing socks. And maybe a giraffe is bathing in the soy sauce bath and combing its neck hair with the Guy Fieri brush. And of course, the soy tub is now perched on top of a World War I biplane. Suddenly, what was once a really boring list of objects has come to life as a scene in your head that would be very difficult to forget. And you can tweak the objects and their relations however you want. Just make sure that it's absurd and visually interesting and also meaningful to you specifically. Extending this technique, it becomes very easy to remember lists of objects and keep track of many more of them at a time. And with a little practice, getting up to 20 items is pretty easy. Before we move on, you've probably noticed that this video, like most of our videos, uses a lot of stock footage. Stock footage allows us to tell better stories, rather than just leaving you to stare at a blank screen while I blabber away, which is how I used to do things when I first started making videos. If you've ever wanted to try making videos like ours, or you just need to make a video for, say, school or work, you're going to need stock footage to build it out of. And one of the best sources for that footage is the sponsor of this video, Storyblocks. We've used Storyblocks for many years, and a lot of our videos use clips from them. The biggest benefit beyond the massive catalog of high-quality footage is that you only pay for the subscription rather than needing to pay for each individual clip. In fact, your subscription comes with unlimited downloads. Also, not only do they have a massive catalog of 4K and HD video, they also have photos, image templates, music, and more. And it all comes with your subscription without having to pay again. It's really a one-stop shop for all of your video needs. So to get started with unlimited stock media downloads at one set price, visit storyblocks.com/thoughtemporium or click the link in the description. Now, with our stash of stock video filled, let's return to our memory problem. We can memorize short lists now, but what happens when we get beyond short lists and into a class context? My first year biochem professor was the sort that would only test you on things that were on the slides. Unfortunately for me and the rest of the class, each presentation had 100 slides, and some had tables or graphs on them we were expected to know. And to add insult to injury, he got up in front of the exam hall on our final exam to let us all know how lucky we were that the university had mandated that he make the exams easier as too many students were leaving in tears. Fuck that guy. But you know what? While my classmates looked at their test sheets with horror, I was pretty calm. I had crammed the entire course into my head over the course of about 2 or 3 days, and for me, the exam was pretty much a breeze. I got a text from a friend after saying how the exam, quote, bent them over a table and spanked them, yet I finished early. I say this not to brag, but because I had used a trick. Through the year, I'd been developing what was called a memory palace. This is the more advanced and complete version of our first example. Instead of relying on creating a totally new scene for every list, we can instead build up a recurring image space that we can repeatedly store memories in. This means we can store information in relationship to one another and a lot more of it at once. How this works is again pretty simple in principle, but it does take practice. First, you need to build a space in your head that you can walk around in. Some people will literally use their neighborhood or their walk to school or your childhood home that you knew every nook and cranny of. I, however, am a huge dork, so of course I did none of those things, and instead spent weeks slowly building up a dark, stormy Frankenstein castle. Don't look at me like that, you clicked on this video. My castle had big, heavy wooden doors with equally heavy ironwork, and a long ramp up the hill to reach the castle. Inside the main hall was a great staircase leading up, and in the middle of the room, a hole down which was a set of spiral stairs descending into the depths. When I needed to store new information, I would simply populate a new room, and that always started with the door. A plain wooden one wouldn't do here, as you're gonna forget which one is which and then it breaks the illusion, so you gotta give it character. Treat each door like the doors from Monsters, Inc. Walking through one brings you to a new room whose size, shape, and content has nothing to do with any of the surrounding rooms. Each door is given a unique design and color scheme so you can keep them straight. For example, when I was cramming for chemistry class, I chose the door from the actual chem lab we did the practical classes in. Or for natural history, it was a door covered in bark, birds, and beavers in a woodland theme. Don't overthink it, go with what feels natural and obvious to you. Okay, great, door done, let's build a room. Going back to chem for a second, when studying for the exam, I just used the teaching lab room itself as my setting. It was a place I'd been to many times, so I knew its nooks and crannies, and it helped associate the content. Now, how do we actually encode information? Well, in this lab, there was a ton of drawers. So in my mind, I would walk over to my station where I would have done my experiments, and I had a few drawers at hand. Inside each drawer, I filled them with information as little pictures, just like we did at the beginning. So let's say I needed to know the types of chemical bonds. For ionic bonds, which you'd find in salts, I pictured a Himalayan salt lamp. For covalent bonds, I pictured this really old toy from when I was a kid called Zoobs. For hydrogen bonds, I imagined groups of zeppelins stuck together in a lattice. This same process can then be repeated for whatever other information you need to cram in there, and you can fill as many drawers with as many categories of stuff as you need. And if you're getting the drawers confused, spruce up the faces of the drawers so they're more memorable. Another example, going back to my natural history class now, was that we needed to remember some specific animals and the specific types of disguise or patterning that they used for defense. For example, ground nesting birds like the greater sage grouse have patterns that disrupt their silhouette while being shaded to match the ground and plant debris that they tend to nest in. So I imagined a sage grouse sitting on some eggs, but taxidermied and under a glass cloche. And I repeated this for all the animals and characteristics we needed to remember. But other information from that class didn't necessarily fit in a cloche, so you come up with something else. Maybe there's a table in the room, and on it is a tiny beaver pond complete with tiny little beavers, like the house hippos of my childhood dreams, all to remind me of the steps of beaver dam creation. Or you make something else up for whatever other information you need to remember. Of course, you don't need to use a haunted castle or rooms at all. You can simply use your walk to work and sub out items that you use as landmarks. That big knotted tree you walk past is now made entirely of cheese to remind you that you're supposed to buy cheese on the way home. Or maybe the mailbox, which is the first thing that you'd normally see on your walk, now has a French mime sitting on top of it and smoking a cigarette. This way, you're reminded that the first group you're having a business meeting with that day is from France, and are condescending. Alright, now that we know how this works, let's try and attack the problem of memorizing a whole deck of cards. First, we need our memory palace well set up, and then we need to build an encoding table. As I said, numbers and suits are just too abstract, so we need a way to remember them without actually needing numbers. So for the number cards, we're going to assign random but distinct items for each number. So maybe an eyeball is number 1, Pac-Man cherries are number 2, Trillium flowers are 3, and so on. You also want to pick items that are a little bit suggestive of the number they're encoding. And then with the number cards done, you can do the same thing with the royals. Finally, you need a way to encode the suit. So one way to do that would be, say that if it's diamonds, we're going to make our object out of crystals. If it's spades, everything needs to be green and floral. Clubs, everything's on fire. And hearts, it's all made out of meat. So if we mix up a deck and start doling them out, we can start encoding them with our memory palace and the encoding table. So 3 of clubs would mean that your mailbox is on fire and there are trilliums planted around it that are just starting to char a little bit. 8 of diamonds, just a little down the street from the mailbox, leaning up on that first tree, is a bicycle made out of diamonds, like Emma Frost in X-Men. The first crosswalk has been replaced by a grassy patch, but amongst the dirt are hundreds of eyeballs. So that must be the ace of spades. All you're doing is building a little story for yourself that is visual and difficult to forget. And by associating it with place memories and physical objects, you're forcing your brain to encode that memory in a lot more places. So that way you're much less likely to forget it, as one of the parts of your brain that does remember it properly can trigger all the rest, and then out comes the object you're trying to remember. And that's pretty much all there is to it. Now you can be just like Sherlock or Patrick Jane and impress people with your neat memory trick. But keep in mind, your mind is much closer to a muscle than you think, so the only way that you're going to get good at this is practice. Don't expect to memorize a whole deck on your first go. Start with small groups of objects and build up. Even just spending a bit of time each day meditating and walking around your memory palace to reinforce its structure and refine its form goes a long way. And also, meditating like that is just really good for you, so it's worth doing regardless. If you'd like to learn more memory tricks like this, I first learned all of this from a book aptly called The Memory Book. And by the way, this part is not sponsored. I just really love this book. And reading it as a kid was such a massive boon for my school journey. This also is not my original copy, though. The book was originally given to me by my dad, who also read it and used the tricks to succeed in his life, too. And just to impress on you the permanence of these memories, keep in mind, my days in university were over a decade ago. These days, I don't even remember all the professors' names or most of my classmates, but I still remember with crystal clarity a heron perched in a cloche to demonstrate vertical patterning, or that Giardia, the microbe that causes beaver fever, has twin flagella on the front. Do I need this information now? No, probably not, but you'd better believe it's in there. And even just the technique in general makes your memory better even when you're not specifically using any of these techniques, because the more you do it, the more natural it is to encode things visually. Although, maybe a word or two of caution. In my case, these tricks worked so well that it was probably also the reason I skipped so much class. Because I knew I was capable of learning an entire course quickly, I could reliably cram the majority of a course in a day or two, and then use the rest of my time to do other things, like build fusion reactors, make embarrassing YouTube videos, and teach myself the science that was conspicuously being left out in class. So do use your newfound memory powers responsibly, or you're going to end up actually missing something important. As it stands, a lot of students are already falling into the trap of using crappy AI to do their thinking for them, and asking them to write even a single paragraph on their own is becoming an insurmountable task. But before these idiot machines had been shoved into every aspect of our lives against our will, humans didn't have access to such an addictive crutch and were forced to use the entire power contained in their skulls. And there is so much more power in there than you think there is. As I said, your brain is actually a lot more like a muscle. It gets stronger the more you use it, but it also requires regular use or it atrophies. If you practice your memory, it will literally get better. If you practice your writing, at some point it goes from being hot garbage to world class. You are capable of literally any skill if you want it badly enough and put in the time. Use your own brain, read actual books, and practice as many skills as you can. I heard it best described in one of my favorite quotes. A human being should be able to change a diaper, plan an invasion, butcher a hog, con a ship, design a building, write a sonnet, balance accounts, build a wall, set a bone, comfort the dying, take orders, give orders, cooperate, act alone, solve equations, analyze a new problem, pitch manure, program a computer, cook a tasty meal, fight efficiently, and die gallantly. Specialization is for insects. If you enjoyed this slightly different style of video where we step outside the lab, let us know in the comments below. We're experimenting with new styles of video and other content that aren't always focused on doing a specific project, as there's just so much more interesting stuff in the world than we could possibly cover by always having to make a thing. And if you'd like to support our work, be sure to check out our Emporium of Man-Made Horrors at thethought-emporium.ca, where you can find amazing merch designs, comfy apparel, ancient papyrus, DNA, bacteria, lab equipment, and more. And while you're there, subscribe to our newsletter to get science news, behind the scenes, and be the first to know when a new video goes out. And of course, we have to say a special thank you to our patrons that help keep the flow of videos coming. And patrons also get access to our supporter Discord, which hosts a growing community of science nerds and other like-minded dorks like us. So if that's something you're interested in, or you just want to support our work, there's some links below. But that's all for now, and we'll see you next time.